The thunder rolled across the dusty plains of Coolidge, Arizona, as Olivia Hayes clutched her swollen belly, staring at the telegram that would change her life forever. The year was 1883, and the words blurred before her eyes as tears threatened to spill. Regret to inform you. Stop Daniel Hayes killed in mining accident. Stop deepest condolences. Stop. She was 22, 6 months pregnant, and now utterly alone. Coolidge had never been particularly welcoming to Olivia since she'd arrived as a new bride 10 months prior, but the small desert town's cool demeanor toward her quickly turned frigid once word of her husband's death spread. The townsfolk had never fully accepted the educated Eastern woman who spoke her mind too freely and wore colors too bright for their sensibilities. Now, as a widow carrying a fatherless child, she became something worse, an object of pity, scorn, and endless gossip. Poor child, they'd whisper loudly enough for her to hear as she passed the general store. Growing up without a father, it's a shame, truly. That Hayes woman should return east where she belongs, others would mutter. What business does she have raising a child alone in these parts? Olivia ignored them as best she could, focusing on preparing for her baby's arrival. The small house Daniel had built on the edge of town became her sanctuary, though the unfinished nursery served as a painful reminder of all they had planned together. One scorching August afternoon, Olivia struggled up the steps of Wilson's General Store, her basket heavy with supplies. Her dark hair clung to her neck in damp tendrils, her blue dress straining across her growing middle. "Mrs. Hayes," Mr. Wilson nodded curtly, his disapproving gaze lingering on her belly. "What can I get for you today?" "I need flour, sugar, and coffee, please," she said, placing a list on the counter. While Mr. Wilson gathered her items, the bell above the door jingled. Olivia didn't turn, accustomed to being scrutinized by whoever entered. "That'll be $1.45, Mr. Wilson announced, the price noticeably higher than her last visit. Olivia counted out her coins carefully. "I believe last week the same items were $1.20. "Prices change, Mrs. Hayes. Perhaps you should be more careful with your spending, given your situation." The injustice burned in her chest, but before she could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension. "Seems to me, Wilson, that a widow deserves your fairest price, not your highest." Olivia turned to find a tall man she'd never seen before standing in the doorway. Dust coated his clothes, marking him as a traveler. His broad shoulders filled out a faded blue shirt, and his face, partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, held striking features, sharp cheekbones, a straight nose, and eyes the color of a summer storm. Wilson's face reddened. "This is a private transaction, stranger." "Is that right?" The man stepped forward, placing a gold coin on the counter. "I'll take whatever the lady's buying, and I'll pay double if you can explain why your prices jump for certain customers." Wilson fumbled with the packages, recalculating. "Must have made a mistake in my figures. $1.20 will do, Mrs. Hayes." Olivia paid the correct amount, gathered her purchases, and nodded gratefully to the stranger. Outside, she paused on the boardwalk, waiting for her unexpected defender. He emerged moments later, squinting against the harsh sunlight. Up close, she noticed a thin scar cutting through his right eyebrow and the gentle crow's feet around his eyes, suggesting he was perhaps 30 years old. "Thank you," she said, "though I fear you've made an enemy before you've even had a chance to settle." The man's mouth curved into a smile. "Wouldn't be the first time, madam. Jackson Quinn," he introduced himself, touching the brim of his hat, "just rode in this morning." "Olivia Hayes," she replied, shifting her basket to offer her hand. "What brings you to Coolidge, Mr. Quinn?" "Work, mainly. I've been hired to help at the Silverton Ranch." He glanced at her heavy basket. "May I carry that for you?" Olivia hesitated, aware of the eyes watching from various storefronts. "I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition. Besides," he lowered his voice, "I reckon giving these folks something new to gossip about might take some pressure off you." His insight surprised her, and a genuine smile spread across her face for the first time in months. "In that case, Mr. Quinn, I accept your offer." As they walked down the dusty main street, Olivia felt the stares following them. Mrs. Whitaker, the banker's wife, practically pressed her nose against the millinery window to watch. Reverend Thomas paused his conversation with the blacksmith, frowning deeply at the pair. "I should warn you," Olivia said quietly. "Being seen with me may not do your reputation any favors." Jackson adjusted the basket in his arms. "Madam, any town that treats a woman in your condition with anything less than respect isn't a town whose opinion I value much." They continued in comfortable silence until they reached her small house at the edge of town. The white paint was beginning to peel, and the garden that had once been her pride showed signs of neglect, casualties of her pregnancy and grief. "This is me," she said, reaching for the basket. Jackson handed it over carefully. "Pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Hayes." "Likewise, Mr. Quinn." She paused at the gate. "And truly, thank you." He nodded, his expression unreadable beneath his hat. "A person shouldn't have to face storms alone, Mrs. Hayes." With that, he turned and walked away, his tall figure gradually dissolving into the heat waves rising from the dusty road. Olivia didn't expect to see Jackson Quinn again so soon, but 2 days later, a knock at her door revealed the cowboy standing on her porch, hat in hand. "Mr. Quinn?" she asked, surprise evident in her voice. "Mrs. Hayes," he nodded respectfully. "I was passing by and noticed your roof has some loose shingles. With autumn coming, you might want those fixed before the rains." Olivia stepped onto the porch, looking up at the roof. "I hadn't noticed," she admitted. "Daniel had always handled those things. I suppose I'll need to hire someone." "No need," Jackson said. "I can take care of it this afternoon if you're amenable. Won't take but an hour." "I couldn't possibly ask." "You didn't ask, I offered." His gray eyes held no pity, only steady determination. Before she could formulate another protest, he added, "My father raised me to help neighbors in need. Nothing more to it than that." The simplicity of his offer disarmed her. "At least let me pay you. A glass of water while I work would be payment enough in this heat." True to his word, Jackson spent the next hour repairing her roof, refusing any payment beyond the promised water and a slice of apple pie she insisted he take. As he worked, Olivia found herself watching him from the kitchen window, struck by the efficient way he moved and the care he took with her home. That single act of kindness opened a door between them. Over the next few weeks, Jackson would appear at her house every few days, always with some small repair to attend to or fresh game to share. News traveled fast in Coolidge, and soon the gossip mill churned with speculation about the widow Hayes and the newcomer Quinn. "He's only after her land," some said. "She didn't wait long to find a replacement," others whispered. But something else was happening in those autumn afternoons, a friendship forming, tender and unexpected, like the first green shoot after a long drought. October arrived with cooler air and golden light. Olivia's time was drawing near, her movements slowed by the weight of her child. One evening, as Jackson split firewood for her winter stockpile, she brought him lemonade and found herself speaking of things she'd kept locked away. "Daniel and I weren't happy," she confessed, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. "We married because it seemed practical. I respected him, and perhaps in time, we might have grown to love each other deeply. But now I'll never know." Jackson set down his axe, wiping sweat from his brow. "Marriage is complicated business. My parents loved each other fiercely, but I saw plenty who didn't. The town believes I should be devastated, draped in black for years." She smoothed her blue dress, deliberately not mourning attire. "But the truth is, I mourn more for what could have been than what was." Jackson studied her face. "You don't owe anyone your grief, Olivia, not even Daniel." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something shifted between them, subtle as a change in the wind. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Miller's buggy. The elderly physician climbed down with effort, medical bag in hand. "Evening, Mrs. Hayes," he called. "Thought I'd check on you since you missed your appointment yesterday." "I'm sorry, doctor. I was feeling tired and couldn't make the walk." The doctor's eyes flicked to Jackson, then back to Olivia. Perhaps we should go inside. Jackson gathered his things. I'll be on my way. No need to leave on my account, young man, Dr. Miller said, his tone cooler than the evening air, unless Mrs. Hayes prefers privacy. Mr. Quinn has been kind enough to help with preparations for winter, Olivia explained, bristling at the doctor's implication. Dr. Miller's examination was brief and peppered with pointed questions about her living arrangements and moral considerations for the child. By the time he left, Olivia was seething. I've done nothing wrong, she told Jackson, who had waited on the porch. Yet this town treats me as if I have. People fear what they don't understand, he replied, and they don't understand a woman who stands on her own. 3 days later, Olivia went into labor as the first autumn storm rolled across the desert. Her neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, one of the few townspeople who had shown her any kindness, sent her youngest son running for the doctor. But Dr. Miller was attending another birth 10 miles away. When Jackson arrived with firewood and found Olivia gripping the doorframe during a contraction, he didn't hesitate. He helped her inside, sent Mrs. Callahan's boy for the midwife, and began heating water. I'm scared, Olivia admitted, as another pain gripped her. Jackson knelt beside her bed. You're the strongest person I know, Olivia Hayes. You can do this. Mrs. Peterson, the midwife, arrived just as Olivia's labor intensified. Though she raised an eyebrow at Jackson's presence, the gravity of the situation overrode propriety. You'd best wait outside, Mr. Quinn, she instructed. This is women's business now. For hours, Jackson paced the small porch, wincing at every cry that escaped through the closed windows. The storm intensified, rain hammering the newly repaired roof as Olivia fought to bring her child into the world. Near midnight, a different cry pierced the night, the unmistakable wail of a newborn. Jackson stopped mid-stride, his heart hammering against his ribs. Mrs. Peterson emerged an hour later, wiping her hands on her apron. Mother and son are both well, she announced. She's asking for you. Inside, Olivia lay propped against pillows, her face drawn with exhaustion, but radiant as she cradled a small bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Jackson, she said softly, meet Daniel James Hayes. He approached cautiously, as if the floor might collapse beneath him. The baby was tiny, red-faced, with a shock of dark hair like his mother's. He's perfect, Jackson whispered. Olivia smiled tiredly. Would you like to hold him? With gentle hands that had broken wild horses and fought in bar brawls, Jackson took the infant, cradling him with unexpected confidence. Hello, little man, he murmured. Something profound shifted in Jackson's chest as the baby wrapped tiny fingers around his calloused thumb. In that moment, a bond formed that would alter the course of all their lives. By morning, news of Daniel James Hayes' birth had spread through Coolidge. Several women from town arrived with meals and blankets, their judgment temporarily suspended by the universal celebration of new life. They found Jackson still there, tending the fire and fielding visitors while Olivia rested. Their whispers resumed with renewed vigor. For the next 2 weeks, Jackson visited daily, bringing supplies and checking on mother and child. He'd sit beside Olivia as she nursed little Daniel, telling her stories of his travels across the West or simply enjoying comfortable silence. In those quiet moments, something deeper than friendship began to grow. One evening, as Olivia rocked Daniel to sleep, she asked the question that had lingered between them. Why are you doing all this, Jackson? You owed me nothing. He looked up from the chair he was mending. When I rode into town that day, I wasn't planning to stay long. Coolidge was just another stop. He set down his tools. But then I saw how they treated you and I couldn't ride away. So it's pity? The thought stung more than she expected. No, his voice was firm. It's admiration. It's seeing someone face adversity with grace and strength. He hesitated. And it's something else I can't quite name yet. Before she could respond, Daniel began to fuss. The moment passed, but his words lingered in her mind like a promise. The first true test of their emerging relationship came on a Sunday in late November. Olivia had avoided church since Daniel's death, unwilling to endure the judgment disguised as concern. But with her son a month old, she felt a growing need to have him christened. "I'll go with you," Jackson offered when she mentioned her plan. She studied him with surprise. You don't strike me as a church-going man, Mr. Quinn." A smile tugged at his lips. "I have a respectful relationship with the Almighty, Mrs. Hayes. We understand each other." That Sunday morning, Olivia dressed carefully in her best-dressed navy blue rather than black, and prepared Daniel in the white gown she had sewn during her pregnancy. Jackson arrived wearing a clean shirt and his least worn trousers, his usually unruly hair slicked back with water. They walked to church together, Jackson carrying Daniel with natural ease. Heads turned as they entered, and the congregational hymn faltered momentarily. Reverend Thomas's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. They sat in the last pew, enduring stares and whispers throughout the service. When it ended, Olivia approached the Reverend about arranging the christening. "Mrs. Hayes," Reverend Thomas said stiffly, "I was under the impression you had abandoned your faith." "I've been in confinement, Reverend. As you can see, my son has arrived safely." "Yes, indeed." His gaze shifted to Jackson, who stood protectively beside her. "And Mr. Quinn's interest in this matter?" "Mr. Quinn has been a good friend to me and my son." The Reverend's lips thinned. "Mrs. Hayes, the church must consider the moral example set for the community. A young widow entertaining a single man in her home raises questions about the environment in which this child will be raised." Olivia's cheeks burned. "My husband is barely cold in his grave, and you suggest—" "I suggest nothing, but others might. Perhaps after a suitable period of mourning." "With all due respect, Reverend," Jackson interrupted, his voice low but carrying, "this woman has faced her trials with more dignity than this town has shown in response. If Christian charity means turning away a child because his mother accepts help from a friend, then perhaps your interpretation of Scripture deserves reconsideration." Several gasps rose from nearby parishioners who had lingered to eavesdrop. Reverend Thomas's face darkened. "Mr. Quinn, you are new to our community. You cannot understand." "I understand plenty," Jackson replied evenly. "I understand that a good woman stands before you, asking that her son be welcomed into God's family, and you're refusing on grounds of gossip." The standoff might have escalated further, if not for Mrs. Callahan, who stepped forward from the group of onlookers. "Reverend Thomas," she said firmly, "I have witnessed nothing inappropriate between Mrs. Hayes and Mr. Quinn. He has shown Christian charity to a neighbor in need, nothing more. If we begin judging such behavior, what does that say about our own hearts?" Other voices joined Mrs. Callahan's not many, but enough. The Reverend, seeing the tide of opinion shifting, reluctantly agreed to christen Daniel the following Sunday. As they walked home, Olivia trembled with lingering anger and relief. "You shouldn't have risked alienating yourself for my sake," she told Jackson. "I said nothing that wasn't true." He adjusted Daniel in his arms. "Besides, I've never been one to court popularity." "No," she smiled up at him. "I suppose you haven't." That confrontation marked a turning point in how some townsfolk viewed Olivia. While many still disapproved, others began to reconsider their judgment. Mrs. Callahan invited her to tea. Mr. Peterson, the blacksmith, tipped his hat when she passed. Small gestures, but significant. Jackson's standing in town was more complicated. Some admired his defense of Olivia. Others resented his challenge to established order. At the Silverton Ranch, where he worked breaking horses, the hands were divided in their opinions, though they respected his skill enough to keep their thoughts mostly private. Winter descended on Coolidge with unusual ferocity that year. December brought snowfall that blanketed the desert in white, transforming the landscape into something alien and beautiful. Inside Olivia's small house, warmth prevailed. Daniel grew stronger daily, his personality emerging in coos and smiles. Jackson continued his visits, now bringing extra firewood and supplies to weather the cold. On Christmas Eve, he arrived carrying a small pine tree and a package wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" Olivia asked as he set up the tree in the corner of her sitting room. "No child's first Christmas should pass without a tree," he replied, producing a small bag of candies and ribbon to decorate it. That evening, they sat before the fire, Daniel sleeping peacefully in a cradle Jackson had crafted. The tree glowed with candlelight, casting dancing shadows across the walls. "Open your gift," Jackson urged, handing her the package. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a silver pen. "I noticed you writing sometimes, on scraps of paper," he explained. "Thought you might like something proper." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. It was the most thoughtful gift she'd received in years. "Thank you. I've always wanted to write stories, but Daniel, my husband, thought it frivolous." "Nothing that brings joy is frivolous," Jackson said. "What kind of stories?" "Adventures, mainly. Places I've never been but dreamed of seeing." She traced the journal's cover. "I have something for you, too." Her gift to him was a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool. "It matches your eyes," she said, then blushed at her boldness. Jackson wrapped it around his neck, the rough wool a stark contrast to his tanned skin. "No one's made me anything in a long time." As the fire crackled and Daniel slept on, the distance between them on the small sofa seemed to shrink. Jackson's hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining with her slender ones. "Olivia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something." She looked up, heart quickening at the intensity in his gaze. "I came to Coolidge running from something. My past isn't as straightforward as I've let on." "Tell me," she encouraged. He stared into the fire. "I rode with some rough men for a time. Not outlaws exactly, but men who lived in the gray spaces of the law. I never killed anyone who didn't try to kill me first, but I've done things I'm not proud of." He looked at her directly. "I left that life behind 3 years ago, but reputations follow a man." "Is that why you understand what it's like to be judged?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I know what it's like when people see only one part of who you are. When they decide your worth based on rumors and half-truths. Are you in danger?" The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the winter night. "No, that life is behind me. I've been working honest jobs, moving from place to place." His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "But I wanted you to know the truth. Before what?" she prompted when he didn't continue. Instead of answering, Jackson leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it made her previous marriage seem like a business arrangement by comparison. When they parted, Olivia touched her fingers to her lips. "I wasn't expecting that." "Neither was I when I rode into town," he admitted. "But here we are." Here we are indeed, she thought, suddenly aware of how drastically her life had changed in just a few months. The new year brought fresh challenges. January's harsh weather made travel difficult, and supplies in town began to dwindle. Jackson took to hunting in the snow-covered hills, bringing back game to share with Olivia and several other families struggling through the unusually severe winter. Despite the hardships, or perhaps because of them, Olivia and Jackson grew closer. Their relationship remained proper by all outward appearances, but private moments of tenderness accumulated like snowdrifts, his hand at the small of her back, her head resting on his shoulder as Daniel nursed, shared laughter over small domestic triumphs. Daniel, now 3 months old, thrived despite the cold. His dark eyes, so like his mother's, tracked movement with increasing awareness. He had a particular fascination with Jackson, gurgling happily whenever the cowboy entered the room. "He knows a kindred spirit when he sees one," Olivia remarked one evening as Jackson paced the floor with a fussy Daniel. "Is that right, partner?" Jackson asked the baby, who responded by grabbing his finger. "You and me, we understand each other." The easy way Jackson had with Daniel stirred something deep in Olivia's heart. Her husband had been nervous around children, uncertain of his role as a future father. Jackson, in contrast, seemed to have an instinctive understanding of what Daniel needed. February arrived with no break in the weather. Snow continued to fall, and tensions in town rose as supplies dwindled further. The stagecoach hadn't made it through in weeks, leaving Coolidge isolated from larger settlements. It was in this atmosphere of growing unease that trouble finally found them. Jackson was returning from a hunting trip when he noticed unusual tracks in the snow. Several horses had passed recently, heading toward town. Wary from years of vigilance, he changed course to follow them. He reached the main street in time to see three rough-looking men exiting the bank, bags in hand and guns drawn. One of them looked familiar. Roy Blackwell, a former associate from Jackson's past life. The bank robbery quickly devolved into chaos. Shots were fired, townspeople scattered, and Sheriff Thompson took a bullet to the shoulder. Jackson, acting on instinct, positioned himself behind the water trough and managed to wound one of the robbers. The other two, including Blackwell, escaped with most of the money, fleeing south. In the aftermath, Jackson helped the wounded sheriff into the doctor's office, unaware that Blackwell had recognized him during the exchange of gunfire. Word of Jackson's bravery spread quickly through Coolidge. The fact that he had risked his life to defend the town's money changed many opinions overnight. Sheriff Thompson, recovering from his wound, publicly thanked that Quinn fellow for his quick thinking. Olivia heard about the robbery while visiting Mrs. Callahan and rushed home, terrified that Jackson had been hurt. She found him in her kitchen, calmly brewing coffee as if nothing had happened. "You could have been killed," she said, checking him for injuries despite his protests. "I'm fine, Olivia, truly." "When they said there was shooting at the bank," she shuddered, "I thought I might lose you too." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Jackson set down the coffee pot and took her hands in his. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "Not unless you want me to." "I don't," she whispered. "I want you here, with us." They stood there, foreheads touching, until Daniel's cries from the other room pulled them apart. But something had been decided in that moment, something neither could put into words just yet. That night, Jackson stayed late, reluctant to leave them alone after the day's events. As he finally prepared to depart, Olivia walked him to the door. "The town will see you differently now," she said. "You're their hero." Jackson shook his head. "I'm no hero, Olivia. I just did what needed doing." "That's exactly what makes you one." She rose on tiptoe to kiss him goodnight, a gesture becoming wonderfully familiar. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows across the street or how it slipped away into the night, heading south. 3 days later, Blackwell returned with reinforcements, 5 men, all armed, all with notoriety in the territories. They rode into town just before noon, spreading out to cover the main street. Blackwell dismounted in front of the saloon. "Jackson Quinn," he bellowed, "show yourself." The street emptied quickly as townspeople recognized trouble. Jackson, who had been at the livery stable, stepped out slowly, hands visible. "Roy," he acknowledged, "been a while." "Not long enough, traitor." Blackwell spat in the snow. "You shot Sam." "He was robbing the bank," Jackson replied evenly. "What did you expect?" "Loyalty." Blackwell's face contorted with rage. "We were brothers once. Then you turned your back on us, disappeared." His eyes narrowed. "Now I find you playing hero in this backwater town. Even got yourself a woman and a brat." Jackson's blood ran cold. "This is between you and me, Roy. Leave them out of it." "Too late for that," Blackwell grinned maliciously. "My boys paid your little family a visit while you were in town, just to make sure you cooperate." Terror shot through Jackson. He took a step forward. "If you've hurt them, they're alive. For now." Blackwell's hand hovered near his gun. "But whether they stay that way depends on you. You're coming with us, Quinn. There's a price on your head in Texas that'll set me up nicely." Jackson's mind raced. He needed to get to Olivia and Daniel, but charging off blindly would only endanger them further. He had to play for time. "Let the woman and child go, and I'll come quietly," he offered. Blackwell laughed. "You're not in a position to bargain, but don't worry, once we're gone, my man will let them go, probably." The standoff might have continued, but fate intervened in the form of Sheriff Thompson, who emerged from his office despite his wounded shoulder. "This is my town, gentlemen," he called, shotgun in hand, "and I'll thank you to conduct your business elsewhere." One of Blackwell's men turned, raising his pistol. The sheriff fired first, and suddenly the street erupted in gunfire. Jackson dove for cover behind a water trough, drawing his own gun. The shooting was brief but intense. When it ended, 2 of Blackwell's men lay dead, and Roy himself was wounded. Sheriff Thompson had taken another bullet, this one to his leg. "Where are they?" "Roy?" Jackson demanded, pressing his gun to Blackwell's temple. "Where's Olivia?" Blood bubbled from Blackwell's mouth as he laughed. "Cabin, north of town. But you're too late, Quinn. My man has orders." Jackson knocked Blackwell unconscious with the butt of his gun and commandeered a horse. He rode north at a breakneck pace, praying he wasn't too late. The cabin was an abandoned hunter's shelter about 3 miles from town. Jackson approached cautiously, tethering his horse at a distance. Through the window, he could see Olivia tied to a chair, Daniel in a basket nearby. A man paced the floor, periodically checking out the window. Jackson circled to the rear of the cabin, where a small window provided another vantage point. He could hear Daniel crying and Olivia's soothing voice trying to calm him, despite her fear. "Your friend should be back by now," the captor said, glancing out the window again. "Something's wrong." "Please," Olivia pleaded. "The baby needs milk. I can't feed him tied up like this." The man hesitated, his expression conflicted. This was Jackson's opportunity. He crept to the front door, tested it gently, and found it unlocked. In one fluid motion, he burst into the cabin, gun raised. "Don't move," he ordered. The man spun, reaching for his pistol, but froze at the deadly calm in Jackson's eyes. "I'll shoot you where you stand if your hand touches that gun," Jackson warned. "Olivia, are you hurt?" "No," she replied, voice shaking. "Daniel and I are both fine. He just tied us up." Jackson gestured with his gun. "Untie her, slowly." The man complied, carefully loosening Olivia's bonds. Once free, she rushed to Daniel, gathering him into her arms. "Get behind me," Jackson directed her. "What happens now?" the captor asked nervously. "Blackwell will kill me if I don't finish this." "Blackwell's not in a position to kill anyone," Jackson replied. "Your options are limited. You can die here, or you can ride out and never return." The man considered only briefly before choosing the latter. Jackson bound his hands and marched him outside, removing weapons and ammunition from his horse before letting him mount. "If I ever see your face again," Jackson said, "I won't be this merciful." Once the man had disappeared down the trail, Jackson turned to Olivia and Daniel, gathering them both in a fierce embrace. "I was so afraid," Olivia whispered against his chest. "He said they were going to kill you." "I'm right here," Jackson assured her, pressing kisses to her hair, her forehead, finally her lips. "I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." Daniel, squished between them, made a disgruntled noise that broke the tension. They both laughed, the sound fragile but healing. "Let's go home," Jackson said. They returned to find Coolidge in an uproar. Sheriff Thompson had survived, but would need weeks to recover. Blackwell and his surviving men were locked in the town jail, awaiting transfer to the territorial prison once the weather cleared. The truth about Jackson's past emerged in fragments over the following days. He had indeed ridden with Blackwell's gang for a time in his younger years, but had left after they crossed a line he couldn't abide, attacking a family homestead. He'd spent the years since trying to outrun his past and build an honest life. To Jackson's surprise, the town largely accepted this revelation. His actions during the bank robbery and in rescuing Olivia and Daniel had proven his character more effectively than any words could have. Even Reverend Thomas, who had been skeptical of Jackson from the beginning, acknowledged his heroism from the pulpit that Sunday. "The good book tells us that a man may be known by his fruits," he preached. "This week, we have witnessed a man willing to lay down his life for others. There is no greater love than this." As February gave way to March, the snow began to melt, and life in Coolidge slowly returned to normal. Jackson moved his few possessions into the small room off Olivia's kitchen, maintaining propriety while staying close enough to protect them, should any of Blackwell's associates seek revenge. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and purple, Olivia broached the subject they'd been circling for weeks. "What happens when the snow clears completely?" she asked. "Will you stay in Coolidge?" Jackson took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether there's a reason for me to stay." Olivia turned to face him fully. "Daniel adores you. He lights up whenever you enter the room." "And his mother?" Jackson asked softly. "His mother has been trying to find the courage to tell you something." Olivia took a deep breath. "When I lost Daniel, my husband, I thought I'd been abandoned to face life alone. I was terrified, not just of raising a child by myself, but of the loneliness stretching ahead." She squeezed his hand. "Then you walked into Wilson's store and defended a woman you didn't know, and everything changed. You brought warmth back into my life, Jackson. You made me laugh again. You showed me what it means to be truly cared for." Jackson lifted her hand to his lips. "Are you saying what I think you're saying, Olivia Hayes?" "I'm saying I love you," she replied, the words both terrifying and freeing. "I love the man who fixes my roof and reads to my son, the man who defends the vulnerable and faces his past with courage. I love you, Jackson Quinn." Jackson's smile was slow and brilliant, like the desert sunrise. "Well, now that's fortunate," he drawled, "because I've been in love with you since I watched you stand up to Wilson with your chin held high, even though your heart was breaking." He shifted to kneel before her, still holding her hand. "I don't have a ring yet, and I know it's soon, perhaps too soon for propriety, but I've never been one to wait when the path is clear. Olivia Hayes, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Their kiss was interrupted by Daniel's cry from inside the house. They broke apart, laughing. "He has perfect timing," Jackson said. "May I?" At Olivia's nod, he went inside and returned with Daniel, who immediately grabbed for Jackson's shirt buttons. "What do you say, little man?" Jackson asked, settling beside Olivia with the baby. "Would you mind terribly if I became your pa?" Daniel responded with a happy gurgle and a tiny fist waving in the air. "I'll take that as approval," Jackson chuckled. As twilight deepened around them, the three sat together on the porch steps, a family formed not by blood but by choice and circumstance and love. The news of their engagement spread through Coolidge with predictable swiftness. Reactions were mixed, but the balance had shifted noticeably in their favor. Mrs. Callahan organized a small celebration at her home, attended by those who had come to support Olivia during her difficult year. Reverend Thomas, after some consideration and a pointed conversation with his wife, agreed to perform the ceremony in early April. "The traditional mourning period is not complete," he told them, "but I believe circumstances warrant flexibility." The wedding was simple but joyful. Olivia wore a dress of soft blue silk ordered from Tucson, with wildflowers in her hair. Jackson donned a new suit that made him look both distinguished and slightly uncomfortable. Daniel, now nearly 5 months old, was resplendent in a white gown, contentedly watching the proceedings from Mrs. Callahan's arms. The church was fuller than either had expected, with ranchers, shopkeepers, and even Sheriff Thompson attending on crutches. Not everyone in town approved, but enough had come around to make the celebration feel genuine. "I, Jackson, take you, Olivia, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his deep voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." When Olivia repeated the vows, her voice trembled slightly but grew stronger with each word. "I promise to be a faithful wife, a loving mother, and your steadfast companion through whatever life brings us." "By the authority vested in me," Reverend Thomas pronounced, "I now declare you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Their first kiss as a married couple was brief but tender, mindful of their audience but unashamed of their love. The celebration afterward was held in the town square, with tables laden with food contributed by various households. Musicians played fiddle and banjo while children danced and adults conversed. Daniel was passed from admirer to admirer, though he inevitably began fussing if away from his parents for too long. As evening approached, Jackson found Olivia sitting slightly apart, watching the festivities with a contemplative expression. "Having second thoughts, Mrs. Quinn?" he asked, settling beside her. The new name brought a smile to her face. "Not one. I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year. Last spring I arrived here as a new bride, terrified and trying to hide it. Now, he prompted. Now I feel like I've found my place, my home." She leaned against his shoulder. "It's not what I expected, but it's better." Jackson kissed her temple. "Speaking of home, I have something to show you." He led her away from the celebration to where their wagon waited. Already packed for the short journey to the homestead, Jackson had purchased the month before a small ranch about 5 miles from town with good water and grazing land. "Close your eyes," he instructed as they approached the house. Olivia complied, allowing him to guide her up the steps and through the door. When she opened her eyes, she gasped. The front room had been transformed. New curtains hung at the windows, a rocking chair sat beside the fireplace, and a handmade cradle stood in the corner. But what brought tears to her eyes was the desk positioned near the largest window, upon which sat her leather journal and a stack of fresh paper. "Your writing space," Jackson explained. "The light's best here in the morning." Olivia turned to him, overwhelmed. "You remembered." "I remember everything you tell me." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Your stories matter, Olivia. They deserve to be written." She wrapped her arms around his neck. "I love you, Jackson Quinn. And I love you, Olivia Quinn. Every day, more than the last." The spring and summer of 1884 passed in a blur of joy and hard work. Jackson threw himself into ranching with the same determination he brought to everything, gradually building their small herd of cattle and improving the homestead. Olivia divided her time between caring for Daniel, maintaining their home, and writing in the quiet hours of early morning. To her surprise, a story she submitted to a ladies' magazine in Tucson was accepted for publication, earning her a small payment and immense satisfaction. Daniel grew and thrived, developing a distinctive personality that combined Olivia's thoughtfulness with a streak of adventure that Jackson claimed came from him. By his first birthday in November, he was pulling himself up on furniture and babbling constant commentary on the world around him. Their life wasn't without challenges. The ranch required constant attention, and drought threatened the summer pastures. Jackson's past occasionally resurfaced in the form of travelers who recognized him, though his reputation as a family man and honest rancher gradually superseded older stories. Coolidge itself changed too. The railroad spur finally reached the town in October, bringing new residents and opportunities. Some of those who had been quickest to judge Olivia found themselves facing the scrutiny of newcomers, a irony not lost on the Quinns. In December, as their first Christmas as a family approached, Olivia discovered she was expecting their second child. She shared the news with Jackson on Christmas Eve, after Daniel had been tucked into his bed. "Are you happy?" she asked, watching his face carefully. His response was to lift her off her feet and spin her in a circle, his laughter filling their home. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he said when he set her down. "I get to be here from the beginning this time, to see you grow with our child, to prepare together." He placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "I missed so much with Daniel, even though I love him as my own." "You are his father in every way that matters," Olivia assured him. "He'll never remember a time without you." The following summer brought the arrival of Thomas James Quinn, a robust boy with his father's gray eyes and a powerful set of lungs. Daniel, now a talkative toddler of 20 months, approached his new brother with solemn curiosity that quickly evolved into fierce protectiveness. "My Tommy," he would declare to visitors, standing guard beside the cradle. Life settled into a rhythm of seasons and milestones. The ranch prospered under Jackson's management, gradually expanding as they acquired neighboring land. Olivia's writing gained a modest following, her stories of frontier life appearing regularly in publications across the territory. Their family grew again 3 years later with the birth of twin daughters, Emma and Elizabeth, who arrived during a spectacular thunderstorm that Jackson swore was nature's celebration of their existence. Through it all, their love deepened, weathering the inevitable storms of life with the strength that had brought them together. The town that had once shamed Olivia for circumstances beyond her control now pointed to the Quinn family as an example of perseverance and success. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, Jackson surprised Olivia with a trip to San Francisco, her first journey beyond Arizona since her arrival. They left the children in Mrs. Callahan's capable care and spent 2 glorious weeks exploring the city, attending the theater, and walking along the coast. On their last evening, as they stood watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean, Olivia turned to her husband. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't ridden into Coolidge that day?" she asked. Jackson considered the question seriously. "I believe we would have found each other somehow," he finally said. "Some things are meant to be, even when the path seems impossible." "Such a romantic," she teased, though his words warmed her heart. "Only with you." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her head as they watched the last sliver of sun disappear into the sea. "You changed me, Olivia. You and Daniel. You gave me a reason to be the man I always wanted to be." "We changed each other," she corrected gently. "You helped me find strength I didn't know I had." As twilight deepened around them, Olivia leaned back against the solid warmth of her husband, content in the life they had built together. From unexpected beginnings, a widow shamed by circumstance, and a cowboy with a checkered past, they had forged a family bound by choice and love and the courage to defy expectations. Back in Coolidge, their children waited, along with the ranch and the community that had gradually become home. Tomorrow they would begin the journey back, carrying with them new memories and renewed appreciation for the life they shared. "I love you, Jackson Quinn," Olivia said softly, the words as true now as the first time she'd spoken them on their porch years ago. "And I love you," he replied, turning her in his arms to kiss her as the first stars appeared overhead. "Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows.